It is 4:23 a.m. and the world is finally quiet enough for me to hear my own thoughts. Let's go over argumentation and what everyone usually gets wrong about it. But we're going to be whispering because my entire family's asleep and I don't want to reap the consequences of waking them up this early in the morning. I have my notebook here. We're going to talk through a couple things which, one, I think are helpful, not necessarily in winning, but more in understanding. And I think that's the key distinction that we're going to make here today. So if you don't know, I enjoy journaling a pretty decent amount. These pages are all filled with some of my writing, and it's very sporadic. For a long time, I liked to journal very periodically, and there was at some points even times when I would journal every single day. And those journals just seemed to be very monotone, I would say, in the writing style. I can actually show them. I have a copy of them here. By a copy, I mean I have the original things. These are from 2023, for example, here. And they're very bland. You may see a lot of writing in here, but unfortunately, there's not very much content in here. For example, this one starts with, "Today was pretty good. I mean, honestly, pretty normal, apart from New Year's. I woke up insanely late at 1 p.m. And it carries on to the rest of my very boring and basic day. So that's kind of the first thing we're going to talk with. It's just opening up one so I know I can use my journal as a resource. But secondly, also just talking about the difference between something like this versus something like this. So this one actually is a lot more personal, so I won't be showing it. But on the other hand, let's talk about the difference between having content and having real material. This notebook here, I'm using as my example of having a good amount of content. I journaled around 3 months there every single day, so these pages are pretty filled, towards the front more because I did around a week a page, just a little snippet of writing. And yet by the end of it, I didn't really feel like I had authentically documented my life that well. With the routine of journaling, I was able to get a little bit more information than I would have if I hadn't been routinely journaling. For example, important dates or when a test didn't go the way I wanted to at school. But really, the days when something actually did happen, I felt more reserved and I didn't want to bring it to a journal. For example, everyone kind of knows that middle school is a time of turmoil, and a lot of times there's social interactions and things like that that are very draining. Because of the way that I was creating this journal, it felt very much like a chore. And instead of it being a place where I could write about my feelings and it feeling a little bit like, I guess, a free version of therapy, it felt very much like an extra piece of homework that I had to do. And whilst I did accumulate a good amount of content, I didn't have the material I was looking for. And looking back, I don't feel very emotionally attached to it. And to me, this feels the same as a task tracker. When you're talking in debates and things like that, a lot of times people get very caught up with having a lot of facts and a lot of statistics, or having a lot of things that may seem like they've put a little bit of work in every single day and maybe written one thing down a day. And whilst I think that can be incredibly productive for things like professional debate settings, when you're talking about regularly arguing with people, and not arguing in the sense of maybe getting enraged about something, no idea what word I left off on, so we're just going to resume. Unfortunately, I coughed a lot. My eyes are teary now. We can label it an emotional talk now. Okay. A lot of times when people go into more personal forms of argumentation, they're talking to someone like a family member or something like that about things like politics. You see a lot of people trying to bring in just facts. I'm guilty of this too, and I think a lot of people are. When you're going to talk with someone, if you bring in something like this, if you bring in the equivalent of this in debate form, you bring in a little bit of information from each day, your heart is never going to be connecting to their heart. And and your words may make it up into the brain, not like up here, not like cemented. They may like make it here, like float around. After that, they're out. If you want to change somebody's mind, if you're debating with a purpose of understanding instead of the purpose of winning, you're going to have to focus on changing their heart and their mind, not just throwing facts at them and having their mind hear it. Now, again, continuing with a little metaphorical analysis that we're doing with my journals. This journal is a lot more in depth, okay? It has a lot more sporadic entries. So, this one I've actually never used as like a daily journal. This is my current one, and it's spanned from about 2026, like beginning to now. And this represents me so much more than this ever could. This may have more content on me, and yet the just sheer difference in depth is unexplainable. In this, it does not feel anything like a chore, and it's a lot more than being a piece of writing in which I document things, and instead being something where I find out things that I didn't understand I was feeling beforehand. To anyone else who journals, you'd probably just say, yeah, that's what journaling is. And I would say that type of journaling is something I never would have understood if I hadn't branched out from methodical, the continuous writing every single day, the kind of structure of it. If I hadn't branched out to the more sporadic forms of just writing when it felt like my words verbally weren't enough to convey how I felt, or when it felt like when I was saying something, I wasn't understanding myself. And just today, this is kind of a line that made me want to go into this. I wrote, in argumentation, it's important to understand that when your opposition stops being a voice of a viewpoint and starts to simply speak as themselves. Let's dissect. Okay. A lot of times when we're arguing against someone, I'm just going to call them the opposition just for standardization, we have the tendency that if we are taking on a position where it's kind of impersonal to us, take, for example, political things that people may debate sometimes. We see people like Dean Withers, who are incredibly popular, debating things, and he'll do all these events where he'll go against a ton of Republicans or a ton of extreme Republicans known as MAGA, and he'll debate them. Dean himself may not be personally affected by all these issues. And correct me, of course, on this. He is not necessarily a member of the LGBTQ, and yet many of the times that he debates, it comes up as a key issue. And he'll bring it up and he debates. Now he's debating more as an entity in that space and debating less as a member. Now, on the other hand, and this is something I've seen frequently in many of his videos, the people he'll be debating against, they begin debating as an entity, they begin debating as someone who is upholding their party's views on the LGBTQ, which on the Republican side tend to be a lot more negative or a lot more conservative leaning. And they'll debate on that front. And then there's a certain point in that debate where it's like a flip of a switch happens. And instead of talking to someone who's representing those values, it becomes very personal. And people begin to use their own anecdotes, people begin to talk about their own experience, and people begin to feel more flustered. And sometimes, I've seen this in his debates a lot, hence the reference to it, they'll get defensive, as if it's something that's like attacking at them. That distinction in debate is one of the most important things to recognize, because the minute that someone feels something is an attack on them, not only are they defending their viewpoint, they feel like they have to defend themselves. The price of misrepresenting what your argument even is and what you have to convince the other person of is a huge lack of misunderstanding. On one front, you're trying to convince them of something they might already know. And at that point, you're exerting your own effort and you're wasting words. There's a very common saying about like words falling on deaf ears. In that case, meaning that words are falling on someone who cannot hear you in the capacity that you're trying to be heard. But in the same way that deaf people are capable of understanding things like sign language and argumentation, just because your words are falling on deaf ears, it doesn't mean you stop talking. It means you change the medium in which you're trying to communicate. Now, obviously, in debate, that still means that you're using words, but it means instead of using a logos approach, instead of using logic and facts and statistics of trying to push all these numbers into somebody's head, you're using an approach which, on the contrary to the more logos approach, which means logic, using an approach which is bathed in pathos, bathed in ethos, and those words really mean that you're taking things on a much more intimate level than a logical approach, a much more intimate level than facts. You're approaching things on an emotional basis. You're approaching things with sympathy and empathy towards the other person. If you cannot be empathetic towards them, you're being sympathetic, you're understanding them. And that ethos, it's really, I think it's still on a smaller level than the pathos when you're trying to connect to someone personally. But that ethos means making sure that you yourself are still appealing to that person as credible. You don't want to be throwing things at them that are insults. You don't want to be throwing things at them just for the sake of what you consider to be winning. Especially on public platforms, I see this a lot. When people are debating one another, their intent is to make the other person look bad. And that is so incredibly harmful because these people are almost never just representing themselves, they're representing a party, an organization, a viewpoint. And when you are part of that representation, the same way a figurehead, a mascot, take the Buc-ee's mascot, represents that brand, right? When you're talking and you're representing a party or an ideal, you are the face of that. And it's a very common thing in sales that the biggest thing you try to sell is yourself. If you are not seen as somebody who cares for other people or will take the time to listen to them and to hear them and instead just wants to be ruthless and brutal in your own form of winning, you will not be successful in convincing anybody. And I say that out of a place of love and understanding because I've been there. Because I've been there with trying to reason with people, to try to reason my way out of things, to try to throw logic in people's face. Because I've been there, because it's the natural approach. If you're academic, if you're used to doing things like research, if you're used to doing things like mock trials and debate, you're used to throwing numbers into people's face and it working and it getting you good points. But life isn't about points, it's about connection. And what that means is that instead of throwing numbers at people, you're throwing out a line of connection. You're saying, I understand where you're coming from. Tell me why you think that way. Those are the single most important words that you can say. Tell me why you think that way. Because if you don't understand why they think that way, you are not making the argument that you need to be making. We're going to return one final time to these as my examples today. If I'm just throwing numeric information, if I'm just throwing repetitive information like I did in this into this journal, I feel nothing towards this. I feel no sense of connection because when I look at it, it's not personable. I don't see a reflection of myself in it. And if someone else were to read it, they would see nothing about me and they'd feel no connection to me. Anything I said in there, if I made any type of statement, they'd feel no compulsion, no real motivation to believe anything I said because they don't know me. And I haven't made an attempt to know them. Whereas the contrast is that in this is intimate. I open myself up and I bring up why I feel things. Meaning that if someone were looking to understand me, I'd point them to this every single time. Because not only does it show a more authentic, raw version of me, but it also offers opportunity for connection because no one is perfect. No one reports the same thing every single day. No one talks about their days as in, today was good and I did this. People start their days and they talk and they enter journals and they begin the opening sentence with, I have no idea what happened and everything was messy and I don't know what I'm doing and I'm anxious and I don't know what I'm going to do tomorrow and I don't know what I did today. That type of understanding when you're talking to other people in arguments, in debates, in regular conversation, that's the type of intimacy that's going to connect you to people and allow you to change their minds. Now, I've kind of exhausted myself on that point, but I want to leave you with one final thing today, and that's your final goal in any kind of debate or conversation should never be winning unless your definition of winning changes to be learning to understand how someone else thinks. Thank you. It is July 20th. It's currently 4:45 a.m. And I love you all very, very much. Good night.